early evening. This is Guess Who's Coming to Kansas City. This is MC Richardson. I'm going to go back on my tenure in the U.S. Navy and also California, just like our person who left his heart in San Francisco, Tony Bennett. I left my heart in San Francisco, Long Beach, San Diego, LA, and you name it. But today we're going to talk about a few things, and we have an exciting guest that most people give you a lot of good information about Kansas City, who were actually born in Kansas City, or their parents told them about what happened before they got here. Well, anyway, this young lady just so happened she did not come to Kansas City when she was 2. She waited till she got 3. And they brought her here from Topeka. And we do have as our guest host, her daughter, Cheyenne Hubbard, and the one who knows everything is Candace Price. Now, I was speaking of things that happened here in Kansas City, but the young lady who her daughter will probably go into more detail that this lady, an entertainer, a singer, she worked at Channel 41 here in Kansas City. She worked at the Kansas City Star. She traveled not only to Shanghai, but also to Singapore, I think a couple times. So she has a wealth of information, not just hearsay. She has a wealth of information. Now, Cheyenne, would you introduce our guest today?
Hello, my name is Cheyenne Hubbard, and I will be interviewing my mother, Candace Price. And hi, Mom. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, before you get to that, before your mother done so many things here in Kansas City, I just want to let you know that guess who's coming to Kansas City through podcasting has reached and is reaching 7 countries. That is amazing. Plus the people can get this show on Facebook. Let me get it right, people. Facebook and also YouTube. But Candace Price, she has a tremendous background in this. She just doesn't take the word of people, and she's on a lot of outstanding national committees for the betterment. MC, we're messing up today, aren't we? For the betterment of our people and other people. So with that in mind, we're going back to Cheyenne.
Yes, I was going to ask her to introduce herself, how she got to Kansas City, and how she grew up to love the city.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Candace Price, and I'm really happy to be on this show today. It's an honor to be able to just kind of bring my story or talk a little bit about what's going on and who I am. And I was originally born in Topeka, Kansas. I was born, of course, after they did the Brown versus the Board decision, but my family was involved in that. And so what had happened, they lived there, but then they moved to Kansas City, Kansas. And I think I was probably about 3 years old or whatever when they moved to Kansas City, Kansas on Quindaro. And from Kansas City, Kansas, we moved to Kansas City, Missouri. So by the time I was about 5 or 6 ready to start kindergarten, I was in Kansas City, Missouri, right off 27th and Garfield, which is where we do a lot of our events at Spring Valley Park. And on the corner of the block, it was one of the first blocks, I think, that initially was getting integrated, because you couldn't go past 27th Street. The 27th Garfield was first integrated by a man by the name of Mr. Woods, and he was a Pullman porter. And then Mrs. Ward, who lived next door, her husband was also a Pullman porter. And on the end of the block was Leon Jordan, famous Kansas Cityan, and Inez Kaiser. So I had a lot of pioneers on my block that I grew up with. When I was little, I didn't know, but they were some great people. Fortunately, I was mentored by them.
Let me interject, if you would, Candace. Well, they said black folks could not, or Negroes or coloreds, could not live past 27th Street, some on 28th. But out on 54th, east of Prospect, you had the Keiths, you had the Shelbys, and you had the Davids. Now back to you, Candy.
Yeah. I mean, it just started kind of like spreading everywhere, and that's when the beginning of a lot of the flight, the white flight, where people moved out. Because, at the time they had, like, Central High School, they had Patel, they were white schools. But when I lived on 27th and Garfield, and I went to Winterfell, right off Vine, and also Lincoln Juniors and Lincoln High School. And wonderful education. It was all black, so it was segregated. I didn't know anything about going to school with a white person or have white teachers. I think I might have had 1 or 2 white teachers when I was coming up. The majority of them were black. And I had an excellent education because the majority of our teachers were masters and PhDs because they could not teach in other schools, so they all taught us, and we had a heck of an education. It was just really great. But I didn't know until I went to UMKC. That's where I attended college, and I think I graduated in '85 or whatever. But when I went to UMKC, I was scared because I didn't know if I could do it, because we kept hearing about how smart white people were, they were smarter than us, and their education was better, they had better books, they had everything. And, our books were kind of like old. They were second rate or whatever, but our educators were so good. They taught us beyond the book. And plus, when I was going to school, we had Black history. And I hear a lot of people I wasn't taught that in school. I didn't hear that. Well, fortunately, with us, we got a lot of Black education, Black history, things that they're trying to stop now in our schools, called critical race theory. They're trying to stop that. I had a lot of that, but also my family taught it. At our table, there was a lot of Black history going on because we had people in our family that were history makers. We had family friends like Langston Hughes, who was a good friend of my grandfather, Dr. Charles Price out of Topeka, who was the first Black dentist in Kansas, and he was a doctor as well. So, at that time, the dentist could also, he put his nefarious fist, so he was a surgeon as well as a dentist. So, but his friends were Hattie McDaniel. They were very close. And like I said, Langston Hughes. And our home in Topeka was used a lot of times, like they had the Green Book that they talked about. People that were passing through stayed at our home in Topeka. And so there was, Will Chamberlain, Frankie Lyman, Bruce Brown, you name it, a lot of the celebrities and entertainers stayed there because they could not stay in the hotels that they performed at or whatever venue they performed at. So they had to have families along the way that they would stay with. So they always stayed at our home, our family home. And that's how we had a lot of entertainers or celebrities that were family friends.
This is Cheyenne speaking, and you brought up a lot of valid points about how, they're not teaching Black history or any type of history that isn't like white in the schools. I can attest to that. I learned more from my family, you all, and just listening to my elders about certain histories, right? Even though the school I went to was considered a historical Black school, which was Sumner Academy. It was on the Kansas side, but it's right by Missouri. And we just never learned that history. And I think it's very important for, the older people in our family to talk about what happened, what you grew up with. Because some of these concepts seem kind of foreign to me, like going to a segregated school. Oh, my goodness. I couldn't even imagine because a lot of my schools were diverse, those mainly minority, and I think that's reflected from Kansas City being segregated, right? To racial laws in place that they wouldn't sell to Black people or any other minorities in certain areas. You can still see that reflecting on how the housing situation is nowadays.
Definitely. In Topeka, what had happened is that where my grandmother lived, they had an integrated block. So they had Black and white, and there were Native Americans in the block. They lived on 4th and Fillmore. And 4th and Fillmore was right down the street, right across the street is Sumner. There, where Linda Brown from the Brown versus the Board was taken to be enrolled, and they would not let her come. So therefore, that kind of kicked off that lawsuit, Brown versus the Board. But the interesting piece about Sumner, there in Topeka, at one point it was all Black school. And then it became white. And then it became, then they had it mixed. They had the Blacks on one side and the whites on the other side. And it was all because of the real estate piece. So across the street from my grandmother's house was some white neighbors were there, and they were very hostile and angry. And that's the first time I heard the N-word, because every time we come out or we'd be outside, her name was Kathy. Old crazy Kathy would come out and just sling all these words, the N-word, what are you all looking at, blah, blah, blah. But the interesting thing is her daughter had children by Black men. And so all her grandchildren, 3 or 4 of them, were biracial kids, and she would call them in. So that was my first you know, kind of where I had this experience, and I'm like, what? You know, and I'm looking at my mom, and they're like, can we just go for this? Because, you know, let's get this on. And they're like, oh, she's just mental. She's crazy. So those are the kind of dynamics that were taking place, you know, there. And then coming back to Kansas City, being in a you know, black neighborhood, I mean, I enjoyed myself. I didn't have that problem of somebody, you know, slinging those words or having teachers that I had to be concerned about not having love for me or wanting to me to be educated. Like when you went to Sumner, the majority of your teachers were white.
Oh, yeah, which is quite funny because a lot of the kids there were not white. I can tell you that much. I think about like 70% were at least, maybe 80% were minorities, black and brown people. And yeah, you can tell, like, I remember I had racist teachers, and that definitely affected my education because I was like, I hope this teacher doesn't hate me because of how I look. You just never know.
Well, it didn't make sense that they were in the school system anyway where they're teaching majority, minority, but you did have racist teachers, and I took care of them. Yeah, I had to, and I'm like, oh no, not today. And Sumner was a historical black school. You know, your Uncle Bobby went there, you know, and back in the 60s or whatever, they went, it was a phenomenal school like Lincoln in Kansas City, Missouri. You know, you had these two stellar schools with these excellent teachers that loved us dearly and made sure that we were educated and prepared to go into the world. And we
was there any other black schools, like high schools or anything in Kansas City, Missouri?
Oh, yeah, when I was coming up, definitely we had Lincoln, we had Central, we had DeSale, we had Manual, you know, parts of West or whatever. Those were your Southeast. Those were your predominantly black schools, and they were great. But we had excellent teachers in all of our schools. We had band, great musicians. We had great football teams. A lot of sports. They played hockey, swimming. We learned all of that. We were totally equipped. We had home ec, and people could sew and cook, and we had they had different auto mechanics. So everybody was skilled. So when they came out of school, you could get a job and be prepared. I mean, we were ready. You know.
Let me add to it, both Candy and Jermaine. We had RT codes. That was a trade school. And the people could learn the different trades, tailoring, they could learn brick masonry, they could learn shoe repair, carpentry, electricity, and what have you, but they could not get into the unions. So a lot of them started their own companies, and we went from there. And both Sumner and Lincoln High School both had junior colleges.
Yeah.
And I just want to remind the people, if you just tune in, this is a historical type show we got today, and we want you to learn something. Get your pen, get your pad, whatever, write down how to contact these people. And Candace has a lot to say, how she got into what she's doing now, besides raising her daughter. So I'll let them continue.
And you said that Sumner High School had a junior college. I don't think I ever heard that, actually. And that's mind-blowing because I went to that school multiple years. I probably walked by the former junior college. But, yeah, they just do not teach any of these things. Like, I had to find out on Facebook who, Leon Jordan was. And he was very...
Yeah, he was our neighbor, and when I was a little girl growing up, they had a niece, so they would call my mom or come up and say, Candy, come on down, we need, come to, all the kids would play, together. So when she was there, I'd go down to their house, and it was phenomenal. Leon Jordan was amazing. He and his wife worked at Jordan. They were wonderful people, and they fought for, they were civil rights fighters, and just, his story is amazing. But there he had all this African art everywhere. First time I saw so much that was sitting in his house because he had lived over in Liberia and had worked over there. It's a whole other story to him. But just being a neighbor, it was fantastic and an excellent mentor. And having people like that in my life early, these are role models for me. So I had no choice but to do, straighten up, fly right, do the right thing, and become somebody. That's what you have to do. You have to have a purpose in life and do it. Because there's too much work out here to do, and we should do it. Put your hands to it. And that's what I always did. So I went on to UMKC, but when I was at UMKC, I got a communications degree, and I also got a degree from the Missouri Conservatory. Now, I'm talking about conservation, but it was conservative. I'm in conservation now, but the Conservatory of Music. So I was there, and I had a fabulous time, and someone told me that I might have been the only black student that graduated from there. I don't know that to be a fact. During that time in the 80s, they said there was nobody else. People would go in, but they couldn't finish. They couldn't make it through. I made it through. And a lot of the work that I did, I could not read music, but I could hear it, and I knew, and I could ad-lib, I could sing and do all kind of things. And my teacher discovered that I could not read. He said, "You're doing this off to memory. We're going through this, and you hear it one time, and you got it." I'm like, "I got it." But that's what I did, and I was a singer, and retained, like you said, across the country and overseas, and it was a wonderful experience.
So let me ask you this. So growing up in Kansas City, right, and you became a singer and traveled across the world to, like, Japan. What were some of the differences that you noticed, like, growing up? You grew up you saw a lot, actually, if you think about it, because in your lifetime, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and that must have been completely,
It was
life-changing.
It was very life-changing because what you heard was wailing across the city when it happened. People, you could hear them crying out, and I remember hearing the wailing of the women around. I mean, it was devastating, and it has impact. When I also remember I was in California when we had the watch riot, and my grandmother every year we take a vacation. She throw us in she'd have her camper and her Buick and whatever, and we go across Route 66. We're heading out to California, but we went to all the, public lands and saw the Grand Canyon or Pikes Peak or, I saw the Alamo, and I was disappointed because I was like in the movies, they had John Wayne and Alamo is all it's so tiny, and it was like just very disappointing. I'm like, what? But, that's a whole other story. But when we went out to L.A., we had Aunt Ruth was a family member, and she owned the L.A. Sentinel. That's a very old-established black newspaper, and it's huge. It's still huge, but that was Aunt Ruth that had that, her and her husband. And we go and visit, see her. But this one time we were there, they were in the middle of the watch riot took place. My brother Michael went down and participated. We were going there. I was supposed to go to Disneyland that day. I could not go. I was disappointed. I was mad. I'm like, But we were sitting there in the hotel and we're seeing the riot take place. They had fire and smoke and just people hollering and throwing stuff. So we're getting that's their local news. So we're getting a real good view. But what was crazy is that your Uncle Michael was there and he was participating. And my mother, my grandmother, they were totally nervous. They was upset. They were like, "Where's Michael? We hope he's going to be safe. This is crazy. They might hurt him. They might kill him." We didn't know. He made it back home. He came back smoking. He was happy. He loved it. Michael was crazy. He enjoyed it. So I participated. And yes, I was going. So I was there. And so yeah.
So do you remember that I just found out recently that there was a race riot in Kansas City in Right after Martin Luther King got assassinated.
Yes, and like I said, Spring Valley Park is a very centrally located park off of 27th and Woodland, Brooklyn, right in there. And the tank actually came down our block.
Tanks, like military tanks?
Military tanks. I'm a little girl. I'm sitting there. They're down in the park. They're shooting. I think somebody died down there. Yeah, I think the police shot somebody down there. And the National Guard, the tanks actually were coming through. Tear gas. I had tear gas in my eyes. It just broke my heart. And then you could see, if you stand on a porch, you could see the fires break out right around Prospect. You could see things were on fire. You could hear, it's just chaotic and crazy, and everybody was upset. And I remember that, and it really imprinted on me and changed, how I lived in life, to be exposed to tanks, military, going down your American, on your American soil, fighting other Americans. It's crazy.
You mentioned Prospect, but I remember I rode around with Otis Keller and Tucky Sanders with the tanks coming down and by the Byron Hotel. And a lot of people, if they had a record, they had killed them anyway and said that they was part of the riot. That wasn't true. And most of the people, the riot didn't spread over in the plaza. It was on the east side of the plaza.
And my brother Bob, they were coming to arrest him because he did make the statement. He said, "I'll blow the plaza up." And they came after him for making that was today they call it a terrorist threat. But he was out there, and he did a lot of work on the plaza because he was a radio guy. And so, it was like some of us could be out there and some of us couldn't. Well, he was privileged and was able to work and do things on the plaza. And I think my father did too. And it was like you could not go there. It was like protected, no. And it was J.C. Nichols,
So the plaza was also, I know the plaza was segregated. So black people couldn't go down in the plaza back in the day? Or
they didn't want you there, and you could definitely have property there. You couldn't have property there at all.
Truth was a dividing line.
Yeah.
Yes. And, that makes a lot of sense. If you just drive through Kansas City nowadays, you can tell, like, there used to be some type of dividing line. It's like night and day sometimes.
Wow. When it's speaking to you, it did some too. That's like you were asking earlier about when I would go overseas. And so the one thing I noticed that when I got to LAX and was flying out and head over to, I guess you stop in Hawaii and then on to Japan or whatever, the culture shock was something, but the people were so good to me. Now the crazy thing, when we were going to the airport, there was a wrestler by the name of, his name? And one of those famous wrestlers, not Ric Flair, but somebody else on that order. We were walking through the airport, Haneda Airport in Japan, and he looked at us and said, "What you doing here?" And he started like he was charging, and we all stood there like, come over, I don't know who you think you're messing with, but we not your regular folks. And he was calling us names and stuff. I'm like, why do I have to go to Japan? And here's this white-meaning wrestler, famous, from America, attacking us, calling us sins, and what are you doing here? And then I remember getting to our, getting situated to settle in, because we're staying at nightclubs. It's a contract you get. You have a gift, and you're going to be there 3 to 6 months, until your visa runs out, and then you leave, and then you can come right back, but you have to leave. They don't play the immigration thing there.
Well, Candace, why don't you tell us about your singing career, how you got involved? We talk about Shanghai, we talk about Singapore, but how did you get involved? Because when I remembered you with Lonnie and the band, you split the Flankers that used to be on 59th and Prospect. How did you get involved into that singing profession?
Well, I was always singing. I was singing from the time I was a little girl, so it was like a neighborhood thing. And, you know, when you go to school, you have talent shows all the time, and you have bands and people, you know, performing. And so different people that was there. You had Willie Matthews, you know, who is now with the Count Basie Band. You had Vernon Black, who was performed with everybody like Frankie Beverly and Mays and Mariah Carey. And so you have a lot of great musicians that were, I mean, it was like banging in Kansas City coming up. You had your jazz people, but after that you had the people, I mean, and we had jazz background, but we went into R&B because the music was kind of changing. But so I sang everywhere, and then I was in one band, and then they had Lonnie in the band, his brother. Actually, before Lonnie's band, I think his brother Ronald had the band, and he had Willie in there, and I think a couple of other people. And then when Lonnie had originally was with Clyde them and her, and they were the best band in Kansas City. I'm talking about, oh my God, Clyde them and her, groundbreaking. And so Lonnie had performed with them, and then he left them, and he came back to Kansas City, and he got Ronald's band that he had, and then they asked me to come in and be the female singer, the vocalist for the band. And so we started performing everywhere. We were practicing, we were performing. We spent a lot of time down on 18th and Vine, because that's where you would go to the Musicians Mutual Foundation. And we had our union cards, so we had some, I guess the last union cards, 627, we had those. And we, you know, and you sit in and you sing and you just, you know, build your craft. And we got a contract to come to Japan and other places, and we went over there, and that's how that kind of started. And I performed with them, and one time we performed with Count Basie. It was really nice. With Count Basie, and Jay McShann and my uncle were best friends. So I've always had musicians or music around and in my life. And like I said, my family before always did hospitality for celebrities, and they know us. So when any celebrity would come to Kansas City, you know, you had a lot of the R&B or, you know, all our music, our black music, they come in town, they would call me, and I would set up their hospitality for a lot of them. So I had people like, I guess, Jamie Foxx, I had Chris Rock, I had New Edition, and I knew Stevie Wonder personally, so he's been a real close friend for years or whatever, and I used to travel with him and his you know, his band a lot. You know, this is kind of how it is. Everybody's friends or whatever. Music is universal, a lot of love, and we take care of one another.
Well, also, before we get into what you're doing today, if you just tune in, you listen to this historical show. We got the Price Hubbard family, and I'm just like a little standby. What they say, a little fly on the wall or whatever. But on the same token, it's this is historical stuff. A lot of people, they don't know. They'll talk a different game, but they really don't know. Like over on 43rd and Charlotte, I'm jumping up to Carl Price Sr., where he had a director's cap, and Candy was there taking pictures because they were shooting Bucktown with Pam Grier and with Frederico Williamson, and Candy was, they was decked out, boy, and they had their little prop chairs and everything before she got into a profession that they have carried all over the world today. But just tell the people about that. You and your family, and your father was a radio announcer. They all was in the entertainment field, except for their brother Carl. I thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah, actually, well, my father was one of the original black DJs in Topeka, and he also, like, you have the Billboard magazine and all of the, you know, Rolling Stone. So he actually was the reporter, the black reporter for the trade magazines then, when you had Buddy Holly and all of them, but he was a radio guy. And so what had happened is that people from across the country actually wanted him to move to San Francisco or to New York, but he stayed here, you know, with the family, to, I guess, kind of take care of his dad. too, because he was getting sick at that time or whatever. So he stayed here, and he and my mom created a black magazine called the News Nugget. And it actually had advertisements they were able to get when their first big advertisement was Coca-Cola. And that was unheard of. He was breaking the color line with ads for his magazine. And he covered all kinds of different events and different things that took place. So the entertainers were part of who he was. And he was an MC and a host. And he was a magician. A lot of people didn't know that my dad did magic. So what he would do a lot of times, he'd go to different schools and entertain the kids with magic. They had never seen a black magician. And I always wondered, I said, how did he learn that? But then Mom would say, well, they would call them at that time, the gypsies would come into town. And this is what they call them, gypsies. And people like, oh, don't associate with them. Daddy, he became friends with them. And they were fine. They loved my dad, and they probably showed him a lot of sleight of hand. I mean, that's a true story. They were showing him things because they entertained it where they went different places. But he was a heck of an MC. He started a lot of that.
Well, he's not the real MC. I am. But your father was the one that inspired me to start publishing my magazine called City In and Outer.
Yeah. Dad was amazing because he actually mentored Horace Peterson with the Black Archives or whatever. Horace would come by, sit on his bench a lot, and talk to Dad. And he would tell him a whole lot of this stuff because he's coming from Topeka, and what he was involved in, they were very progressive there. And they had kind of like their little Black Wall Street there that my grandfather was part of. He was Dr. Charles Price, and he was a big politician, big Republican politician in Topeka. He worked with Alf Landon and worked on his campaign, which was Nancy Castlebaum's dad or whatever. So they spent a lot of time in politics. They were politicians, They were rolling that. And so we I guess my dad and them would have dinner with these different groups over there, Republicans or whatever, because at the time, a lot of black people were Republicans. They changed as time went on. But they were part of the party of Lincoln at that time, and they were working it. But it switched over. The platform switched, the party switched to Dixiecrats, they went Republican, Republicans became Democrats. It was really something. A lot of people challenged that, but it actually did take place. And like, it's weird and crazy today. So my dad was a MC, and he also, like I said, he mentored Horace Peterson. He mentored a lot of the young people who came up. So he was part of the inspiration of the Black Archive. A lot of people don't know that, but it's true. My dad introduced me to Satchel Paige. He would come down our block because we're across the street from the park. He would come that way all the time, and then he'd cross through the back driveway. He'd go over to the Williams family, and that would be Charles Williams and Martha Williams, whether he was best friends with them. So we saw him all the time. I didn't know who this man was. He was at Satchel Paige. So I was blessed to meet all these great people, through my family connections. So you just knew all these different things, and they inspired a lot of people. When you heard that Ghetto to Go mine, that was inspired by my dad too. And people they're not going to admit to that. But I have all this on paperwork that he had that. And then on the Quindaro Ruins, he was down there. He was, when I was, I think, about 12 years old, he took me down there. Because we lived in Kansas, but he was at Quindaro. He was one of the people that, the media part of Quindaro, where he was teaching and telling people what it was. So the guy, Marvin Robinson, I would say, your dad is the one who got me inspired. Now, he's Mr. Quindaro now, right? So that was my daddy who brought spotlight to a lot of that. But his name was never mentioned when they give credit to different things. He took me down there. I was kicking rocks. He said, do not kick these rocks. This is sacred. I'm like, oh, okay. So he was involved in a whole lot of different things. And I guess at some point, I guess we're going to have to tell his true story so these people know where things started.
Well, on the same token about your father, he was so instrumental here in Kansas. You made the transition from Topeka, and then you got a lot of the people in Tennessee. But on the same token, a lot of people don't realize that history was not shared with them. like it should be shared with them. Like my aunts, the Richardsons, back in Arkansas, they were teaching black history, Negro history then, way back then. But then they just really, like everybody say, African study, like they shot. And people question that, say, well, it's all history. So we got people like Miss Candace Price that can share that with us. And I know if you just tune in, you listen to a special broadcast with, let me get these names right, Cheyenne and Candy Price. And we're talking about a lot of things. We still haven't got into urban America outdoors, what they're doing now, and how they go in just as many countries. They probably surpass our show that we're doing today. But they go in they set and they got started by the help of Yuma, and where they got their first TV program, and we got so much things we need to talk about, but I'm going to let you guys talk. I might just interject something because it's hard for me to refrain when there's so much I know about your family, but the public has a right to know.
I appreciate that. It's great to be there, and it's great to be with my daughter who was embarked upon, following in footsteps and actually taking it to the next level. Because Miss Cheyenne has been on TMZ about 6 different times. She's been on Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, they are calling her all over about, let's hear what you have to say. Let's talk or whatever, because she brings an excellent perspective to, from her generation that is needed. And I believe in letting young people talk. I learned so much being around the younger people, and they keep me straight. I can tell them what I know, what I've been through, and what I see, but I always am open to listen to what they want their future to be, because they're going to inherit it. So Cheyenne has been very instrumental. Like we have the TV show Urban American Outdoors, and that started about 1998. And how that started is that I had worked at Channel 41 for over a decade or whatever, and I worked as a star in Gannett Outdoors. I had all this, these different media jobs or whatever. So I learned how to do a lot of things, because when they had those different jobs, sometimes the other folks didn't do it, and they said, well, here, Candy, you do it. And I'm like, okay. At first I kind of balked, but I was like, okay, that's good, because I'm learning everything that I'm going to need to make my own. I'm going to build my own table from the stuff. Since you don't want to do that job, you have the title, you're getting the salary, but I'm going to get the knowledge. And that's kind of like what happened, and I met Wayne Hubbard. We were working on, we were brought together working on a project for, with the Kansas City Chiefs, Marvel Comics, Andre Rison, who was with the Chiefs at the time, and his name was, they called him Spider-Beast. Wayne was brought in to help negotiate. I was brought in to help do some of the marketing. He was a marketing person too, and by different people. And we enjoyed working together. We had a similar work ethic and got things done. So he was able to negotiate that particular deal, having the shirt with Andre Rison and the Spider-Man outfit on top of the Kansas City Chiefs football without having to spend any money. They only had to pay Andre. He talked to Stan Lee. Now you have to remember, Marvel Comics was having problems financially, so they're open, they're open to talk, but just anybody can talk to them. Actually, Marvel came back after Blade came out. So Wesley Snipes actually saved Marvel Comics with a Blade movie. A lot of people, and then later you had your Spider-Man and you had your other stuff. But back to us, that's how Wayne and I got together. So we put the show together. He said he was an outdoorsman. He's from Nowata, Oklahoma. He's Black Freedman Cherokee. And he wanted to do an outdoor TV show from his perspective. And I had the TV experience, and he said, how do we do this or whatever? We put our ideas together, and we went out and shot it. First, we had to kind of look at some of those outdoor TV shows, and they're, white male dominated, and they're killing a lot of animals. I'm looking at it, I didn't like it. I'm like, oh, this is like, it was shot bad, produced bad, and I didn't like the animal aspect of how they did that, and they showed them they were very blatant with it. And I'm like, oh, that's not Wayne. Wayne's coming from an indigenous black man, and that's and the way he did it was totally different. It was kind of more of a sacred, kind of a spiritual thing, and everything you harvest you eat, and you only take what you need. You don't go, you know. So I liked that, and he took me out on pheasant hunt, and it was enjoyable, and it was more nature and that's driven. I was like, you know, I like being out here, and I start understanding that being out in nature is good for us as black people. We need the fresh air, we need the sunlight, we need open spaces, we need to go out there to reconnect with the earth. You know, we were people, land people, we were spiritual people, and that brings all, that connects all of that back together. So he said he wanted to do the show, we put it together. I think in 2003, we sent it out. You know, we had prototype pilots, sent it out to different friends I had in TV land, and we were picked up by Thursday by 3 different syndicated networks. Our show hit, and right after that, we were invited to the National Sports Emmy. So, you know, they're talking about Andy So White, and they didn't, you know, everybody's talking about the birthday. We was there 2004 in New York at the Marriott there doing the Emmy show, and they had it. You had people like Daryl Strawberry walking around, the different news people, NFL, you know, film, the Sobo Brothers. You had all these, you know, Tim Russett. I mean, they were all there, and they set us at the table with HBO people, and the lady who created the Emmy, the original woman who was the one who came up with the Emmy concept, she and her husband sit right next to me and Wayne, and they were from Chicago, so that's where Emmy first started. And so we're sitting there with her, and she became my friend, and she was older, you know, she was probably, at that time, late 70s or something, and she was talking about it, and we became friends, and we talked. And different things that she had views that she wanted to do, they weren't ready for it. So, anyway, today you have Andy So White, and they just recently had all these people invited to the Emmys and being there, but they still didn't win. That's the problem with the Emmys. But we have been nominated 4 times and have won over 70-something plus broadcast and cable awards, and it's been just wonderful. And we talk about outdoor lifestyle, about anything with nature, wildlife, environmental justice. We were talking about climate change when we first started, that we have a problem. We could see that something was wrong. And we've been talking about this forever and ever. And today our show runs on, there's the network Sinclair. And Sinclair is the largest TV affiliate group in the country. So our shows are running there, and I think we're on Stir, which is a digital streaming platform, so everybody will be able to see that. That starts in a minute as well. And we've been on nonstop since 2003, weekly.
Why don't you tell our listeners some of the boards that you and Wayne sit on and how important they are?
Well, as a matter of fact, this past week, I got a call from Secretary Vilsack's office about a listening session that he had wanted me to be on, participate. And, I mean, earlier they had sent me emails on it, and I just kind of like, I guess I kind of ignored it. I'm so busy. But they called me, and they said, we want you on a listening session. So this past week I was on a listening session. It was for racial justice. And they'll be creating a commission, and I believe that I'll probably be placed on this commission coming up. But prior to that, I was on a federal advisory committee, and those are called FACAs, and they pull from people across the country, and you go to D.C. or different places, and it was with the Forest Service, and the Forest Service with the USDA, and so they deal with all your agriculture, all your their land management of all the forests, and there's 193 million acres of forest land. And the majority of your water comes off of forest land. So that's why it's very important that we are involved and at the table with that. So for 5 years, from 2012 2012 until 2017 or whatever. I was on that, and I represented youth and underserved communities to make sure that the youth component was involved, with that. Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, you listen to Candace Price and Cheyenne Hubbard, and they've given a thorough, we hope, background to what a lot of people are not privileged to. But then we step back to the Parkview Hotel where the entertainers have to stay there in Kansas City, located down on 10th and Sill. They have Vivian, the restaurant on 12th Street. They have Johnny Cakes. But blacks go back to 9th Street. Then they wouldn't let them go past except for where Satchel Paige resides at, past 27th Street. But we have really come a long way, but we haven't gone far enough. So, Cheyenne, we know that we haven't allowed you to talk, and our youth is our future, so would you join us? Are we on? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you listen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. So, yes, hello. I was saying that it was very important to hear this story. Okay, let me tell you why. Because if I didn't have my mom, none of this information would have been passed down to me. I didn't know. I don't think a lot of my peers know any type of Kansas City history because we were just never taught. I feel like it's very important for the older people to talk to their children, their grandchildren, and tell them what they went through because it is so shocking to me. Like when you talk about the tanks rolling down Kansas City, just blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Because a whole race riot where they had to send in, I'm assuming, National Guards, and they had to send in tanks. That's just mind-blowing. Like, what else do I not know? Because there's just been a lot of events that happen in Kansas City. Like, I think I just recently found out that there's tunnels under Kansas City. And no one talks about that. Because of, I guess they used to have streetcars, and they brought back the streetcars, so it's not as big as before.
Mm-hmm. They have a lot of tunnels and caves in Kansas City. And I think Hollywood has a big connection with Kansas City because a lot of the films were preserved or kept in Kansas City areas in those caves underground, and it's cold, and refrigerated, so some of the original Hollywood movies are here. A lot of people don't know that. And there's food that is underground. And you have a lot of underground businesses. So, a lot of folks don't know that.
Yeah. And see, when I go to UMKC currently, right? And talking about records and old Hollywood films, at UMKC they have this thing called the Sound Archive. And there's so many archives just in Kansas City that no one talks about. And you can just find so much historical records just right in your hometown. That's free of charge.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's called the Moore Sound Studio, the archive.
Yes.
Dr. Moore was my actual professor when I was out at UMKC, and he taught me how to do archives. He was my favorite. I took as many classes as I could in the Gaylord Moore, and he was amazing. So all of that is from the body of work that he started. And I got to do my first oral history. He had me go out and just interview people. And so he was the perfect educator for me, and I just loved him dearly. And so now you're back in the space that I was, where he started me, but you're in his archives, and you'll probably be doing a lot of that coming up as well.
Ms. Kim, Shane, if I can interject for 1 second right quick. My name is Alfred, I'm reserved by Jim Comrades. Cheyenne also hosts a show every Saturday almost for the last 6 months. I think it's been longer than that, I'm not sure. On our radio show, on 50 Years Out Radio for the last to tell them much about youth and what youth do. And also, like I said, that Kansas, even after that, that in 2019, she was one of our first Trailblazer Award winners in Kansas. Her and Wayne were. And he also was honored also that year for the Manufacturing Congress, members of the year in Kansas City. And then continue to do great things, and also being well appreciated. I need to throw that in there right quick.
No, I appreciate that you did, because that's very important. And to have Cheyenne to be able to be on that platform is such a blessing, and we appreciate the opportunities that you do for her there, and also you see what you're doing with Yuma. That's what we have to do with our youth, is that what we've all been blessed to have, we have to pass it on, we have to test it and have them carry it on, so that everything that we do will not be in vain, but it's a legacy piece. And so this is fabulous, and I'm so excited that she has the opportunity and has great men such as herself allowing that, because that doesn't happen every day. It's not available. And if it is, sometimes it's not given to the next group. And that's why you guys are fabulous for that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
But you know what? Once again, each and every Saturday, our time is about up. So would you two or three say what our people need to know and how you can be reached, and how many people we are reaching and we're steady building?
Well, to reach myself, Candace Price, through Urban American Outdoors TV, you can call us directly at 913-334-5177. Yes, I do answer my phone, and I do talk to people all across the country. They do call me, and they're always like, "You answered your phone? You're really talking to me?" I'm like, "Yes," because that's important. I'm the people. I stay with the people. And I guess if you want to reach Cheyenne, Cheyenne, you have an email.
Yes, Cheyenne, what are you presently doing? Besides you on the show, you also have a business.
Oh, yes. I have a business, and it's called Connected Trees. And it's a genealogy business. I find people's ancestry, their cousins, their family. And it's really nice to find out who you really are, basically, and who you came from. And so if you have any questions for me, my number is 913-202-8359.
And Mr. R. Folks, and who are you with now?
Well, I'm the founder and CEO of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, but also host Lunch with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. That's every Saturday from 1 to 3 on Ferguson, USA. And I can reach the radio station, or you can just email my email address. That's IRA Folks, FOWLKES@yahoo.com.
And I'm with the United Minority Media Association, and also we're planning to have a Zoom meeting next Saturday from 3:30 to 4:30, and then we have a special show with some people there called the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement. That'll be on next Saturday from 5 to 6, but the first one is on from 3:30 to 4:30, and you can call me, 816-822-8866. We'll tell you how you can be part of the Zoom meeting. And Mr. Scott,
yes,
we haven't heard from you.
I've been quiet. But my name is Scott Owen. I'm the general manager of Ferguson USA, HotTalkRadio.com. You can reach me at voiceovers4u, number 4, letter U, at gmail.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, and we want the Chiefs to win tomorrow. And Arkansas is beating Texas A&M. And what did Missouri do, Ira?
I'm not sure, but the Cardinals won today. They're sitting on the Cardinals record. They won 15 games in a row.
Well, Mr. R. Folks, why is it important that people listen to and tune in to Ferguson USA Hot Talk Radio. Also, you have a website, you have podcasting, you have archives. Why is it important?
Well, it's important, okay. The station kind of grew out of the Michael Brown era, some years ago, and we were held at your church where we are located at now at our Ferguson USA. I thought radio was located in the Radio St. Lawrence Family Church in the Bayview here, and here we still let black people have a voice in our community. We have white people, we have black people. We know what you call a rainbow. We can all come together and also respect each other and work together as a team.
Well, that's it for today, but be sure to stay tuned. And what days, repeat again, when can you be heard, Mr. Folks? And also, Cheyenne.
Oh, matter of fact, Cheyenne show is coming on every third Saturday in the month. She can be heard on lunch with some Zulu Montgomery. Am I right, Cheyenne?
Yes.
And she also is on every fourth Saturday on Guess Who's Coming to Kansas City.
Yes.
Can I get your autograph?
Thank you. We need to bond together. We also need to identify various sponsorships so we can all exist.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Candy,
Critical.
are you going to bring me some bison or the pheasant, or are you on break right now?
We have something for you to say.
Okay, something for me. And let me, for the benefit of our people don't know, the Price family and the Hubbard family will become part. They're going to be an associate member because they have a family not only in Topeka but also down in Atlanta, Georgia. So they all, there's so many Prices, not as many Prices they got Richardsons around here, but we all working together and we allow Mr. R. Folks to come in to get involved with us, even though he's off the plantation down there. And when we can stop Mr. Scott from riding his motorcycle, we can get in touch with him too.
We're so good. We thank you so much. We're all in the family. That's a good thing.
Yes.